And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast alongside Todders and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. We're brought to you by our friends over at Preborn and their network of clinics that provide free ultrasounds to women who are considering the murder of their children. And not only do they save lives, but I'm going to tell you right now, they're saving souls. Because it's not just the child who suffers. And greatly, and when it comes to their own morbidity, as much as you possibly could. But it does something to the soul, too, the systemic murder of your own children as a society and for individuals as well. And last year alone, you all helped Preborn save about 70,000 babies and their mamas. That's just incredible work. On behalf of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you know, that whole thing we're commemorating here in the Independence Month of July. So let's do something even greater here in the second half of 2025. And if you want to make a tax-deductible donation today, just dial pound 250, say the keyword baby on your mobile phone, pound 250 and keyword baby on your mobile phone, or go to preborn.com/Steve, make that tax-deductible donation there at preborn.com/Steve. All right, coming up on today's show, the return of a man we greatly admire. Dr. Peter McCullough is going to join us. He has a new book out. The title is fascinating, especially given his academic credentials. So we're going to talk to him about that coming up at the bottom of the hour. Next hour, for fake news or not, we're going to decide, is this discussion about fake news or is it idolatry or not? Is there something deeper happening here with this montage of clips we're going to play for you coming up in the second hour? Is it just politics and, you know, it's blood sport, it can be dirty, or is there something more afoot? We'll have that conversation next hour. And then Pop Culture Tuesday, we're going to talk about Happy Gilmore 2, because I think the film is actually very similar to the American Eagle ad that we talked about on yesterday's show. And why there are aspects of this movie that would have made previous generations of Americans very uncomfortable. And yet, the heart of this movie is actually a direct shot across the bow of the spirit of the age. So we'll get to that and more coming up right after Aaron tells us what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by terror in New York. A man stalked through a Manhattan office tower firing a rifle Monday, killing 4 people, including a New York City police officer, and wounding a 5th before taking his own life. The shooting took place at a skyscraper that's home to the headquarters of both the NFL and Blackstone, one of the world's largest investment firms, as well as other tenants. The gunman, identified by authorities as Shane Tamura of Las Vegas, had a long documented mental health history. Here's how CNN described the shooter as the events were unfolding.
Among them that they did get, they do know what he looks like. Sunglasses, mustache, male, possibly white.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams said Tamura intended to target the NFL's headquarters, but took the wrong elevator. At least 5 have been charged in the brutal beatings of white individuals in downtown Cincinnati on Friday night. Their names have not yet been released. Cincy Police Chief Terry Theetge chastised those on social media for sharing the brutal videos.
Social media and journalism and the role it plays in this incident. And yes, guys, that's you. That is you. Social media and mainstream media and their commentaries are a misrepresentation of the circumstances surrounding any given event. What that does, that causes us some difficulties in thoroughly investigating the activity and enforcing the law. The responsibility with social media is it just shows one side of the equation quite frequently, without context, without factual context. And then people run with that. And then it grows legs and it becomes something bigger that we then have to try to manage as part of the investigation.
Learning Chinese today. Today's phrase is to protect and serve. What does it mean?
保护和服务 这是什么意思？
In other news, Vice President J.D. Vance was in Ohio yesterday and addressed the Epstein debacle. Here he is answering a question from an AP reporter.
The president has been very clear. We're not shielding anything. The president has directed the attorney general to release all credible information and, frankly, to go and find additional credible information related to the Jeffrey Epstein case. He's been incredibly transparent about that stuff, but some of that stuff takes time. You've got to assemble that stuff. You've got to compile that stuff. You've got to redact some victims' names so that you protect the victims. But the president has been very clear. He wants full transparency. He's asked that from the attorney general, and I know because I talk to her all the time, the attorney general is hard at work on that issue right now. But I think I got to make an observation that there's an interesting thing about this case that the American media seems to totally ignore. For 4 years under Joe Biden's Department of Justice, the media didn't give a damn about the Epstein files or about the Epstein case. For literally 20 years, the story about this scumbag, and he is a scumbag pedophile, Jeffrey Epstein, he's dead now, but for 20 years, you had Obama and George W. Bush's Department of Justice go easy on this guy. They didn't fully investigate the case. They didn't show any curiosity about the case. And now Donald J. Trump is asking his Department of Justice to show full transparency. And somehow that's a criticism of Donald J. Trump and not Barack Obama and George W. Bush.
HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. laid out in a post on social media yesterday about the incredible liability protection vaccine manufacturers have enjoyed since the mid-'80s and the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program the federal government set up for restitution to those injured by vaccines. Kennedy says that latter program has, like many things in the swamp, become captured by special interests and no longer actually works for those victims of vaccines, and he intends to reform that program. Meanwhile, the American Academy of Pediatrics is calling for the forced vaccination of everyone against everything, with no exceptions of any kind, including religious exemptions. One more note about what we talked about yesterday with Sydney Sweeney and American Eagle and their new ad campaign. Check out this headline from MSNBC. Sydney Sweeney's ad shows an unbridled cultural shift towards whiteness. Subheadline: advertisements are always mirrors of society, and sometimes what they reflect is ugly and startling. Yeah, tell us how you really feel, MSNBC. And finally, did I get Colorado football coach Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, wrong? Yesterday, he called a press conference and was joined by his oncologists, where he revealed he'd been diagnosed and beaten a dangerous form of bladder cancer. Coach Sanders was asked what it was like to stare death in the face.
I didn't stare death in my face. I stared life in the face, man. Man, you think I'm playing when I tell you I'm God's guy? I really am. I'm allowed to go through these trials and tribulations so that I could touch and reach and bless people with my words, with the energy, with that thing that God gave me. So I never thought about no death. You know, I had to make a will because I want to be a business. I want to be a good steward, you know, for my kids and for my family. But no, I got too much life to be thinking about death. Too much life. I got too much life in me, and I got work to do.
Coach Prime also had a sense of humor about what he's been dealing with in the aftermath of having his bladder removed.
I depend on depend. You know, if you know what I mean. I truly depend on depend. Like I cannot control my bladder. So I get up and go to the bathroom already 4 or 5 times a night. But then I'm sitting up there, waking up, you know, like my grandson. We in the same thing. You know, we got the same problem right now. We going through the same trials and tribulations. We're trying to see who has the heaviest bag at the end of the night.
There's Coach Prime, who dealt with a very serious, potentially deadly form of cancer, having a good sense of humor about it and saying God allowed him to go through this trial in order to touch other people. If nothing else, that's at least a very good attitude. Oh, and one more thing, since Steve asked me to put this in the montage. I went to our former studio space yesterday to start cleaning the place up and was greeted by an old fiend. Yes, for those of you listening, the wasps moved back in as we moved out. And that's what happened while we were away.
Come on, man. Are you kidding me with that? Someone sent me a note. Well, it's wasp season. Is it wasp season at your work, bro? I mean, if you're working outdoors, yeah. But if you're working in an office, you have wasp season in your office building? Come on, man.
Deion's got bladder cancer. You've got wasps, you know, suffering. It's a gateway.
All right. Let's get to what's in the montage. You know what? I'm going to go to you. right? Because this is right in your wheelhouse as a Catholic, okay? Is there any level of guilt I should feel for the fact that was the Cincinnati sheriff, Aaron, correct, that you put up
Police
there?
chief.
Police chief, yeah, okay. Is there any level of guilt I should feel at all? I'm asking, okay, because I don't. And so I want to check, all right? Maybe I'm wrong, okay? Is there any level of guilt I should have at all that right away, if you have a hag or harpy, but I repeat myself, as your sheriff, your commissioner, and you're a major urban area, I just can't take that seriously.
Are you asking me this because you're setting me up because you read what I said about this?
No, I didn't know. I didn't even know what you said. What did you say?
Well, this is another incredible failure of a major American city. I don't believe women should be police officers. They certainly shouldn't be leading departments. And it always ends up like this. It's not like ever like Captain Marvel over there. This is you can't just have the laugh track. This is a failure of all of the men of Cincinnati. This is on you. And honestly, we should cancel football season. The Cincinnati Bengals should not be allowed to play a game because that's where your heart is. We know that's where your heart is, and so you allow this to happen. This is an absolute joke, but it's not even a gamble. This is a certainty. When you prioritize your life the way that you are, if the fish rots from the head and the head is supposed to be the man, and you have done what you have done with your stupid life, you get her being your boss. That's a joke, but you deserve it. So no, you should not have any guilt at all about your reaction to this. But then if we do not start asking serious questions along the lines of the guy, I can always forget his name, but in your little pastor council on the senior statesman said, oh, you guys all want revival. Do you know what it's going to mean? Do you know what it's going to mean? Because here's the secret. You do, but you don't plan on doing anything about it because you got plans. It's almost football season. You're a joke.
I'm trying to envision any previous generation of Americans that would have had this level of hag, and she's not isolated. I mean,
no.
How many of these have we seen just in the last couple of years? New Orleans, we saw this last Christmas, right? Wasn't it New Orleans, Aaron, when the bowl game bombing, right?
Yeah.
They had another hag, harpy, police commissioner or sheriff down there.
We know the map.
How? What I would like to know, how does that hag harpy pass any level of physical requirement to even do the job? How much did the requirements have to be watered down for her to even get into the job and excel to the level that she did? How is that even possible?
This is transgenderism.
Yes.
It's the exact same thing. The same thing that has a bunch of dads going to track meets and letting the guy run against the girl and not doing anything about it. The same applies here. The whole department is now transgendered if you believe she can lead you. And what you should be doing, all the men of that city should now be going down and surrounding City Hall and saying, you fix this and you fix this now. Just like you would about the track. This is about men, once again, understanding the duties of manhood and citizenship and having enough of this, because we say all the time, but it's usually with the laugh track. Sober up, do the thing, demand in every way, shape, and form that she is fired ASAP. If not, the failure isn't just the muckety mucks, it's yours.
And I mean, the hag harpy aspect of the level of lecturing there.
That's you guys.
Yeah,
that's you guys.
Yeah, the sanctimonious level of lecturing there. I mean, I thought The View was on hiatus. Apparently, it's live from the Cincinnati Police Department briefings. I mean, just the level of harpy sanctimony there. Karen called and said, "My goodness, these people are insufferable." I mean, it's just, I can't imagine that this would have been, and someone would have stood up and said, that person doesn't make anybody who would do anything bad to us afraid to do it.
There is apparently a lawsuit going on because obviously she's Mrs. DEI and several white police officers are have filed that lawsuit jointly, complaining that their career is stalled because they're white guys. But I get that. Yeah, a lawsuit is one way to go, but just publicly now, it wasn't.
What you're saying is, what if 20?
Yeah.
What if 20 officers just walked off the force and said, you know what, this is a joke. Good luck replacing.
You're all in danger because if you believe, Aaron, your thing in Chinese, protect and serve. Not very long ago, because of the press, you didn't have that moment. There are all kinds of ways to have this moment now. And for all the reasons you're going to talk about with Sidney Sweeney in the movie too, there is a moment now where publicly people are waking up and you just go there and you say, listen, we're not safe because of this.
Yeah, we had to be.
We can't do this job in good faith.
We had to be asleep for a long time.
Yes.
For hags and harpies to take over major American city police departments. I mean, this is not. This is cyclical. This isn't even just we're asleep for football season. You're talking essentially we just took a generation off in order for something like this to get to this level of systemic acute exposure. Which brings me to the MSNBC headline that Aaron highlighted. And listen, there are literal MSNBC day parts that have fewer people between the ages of 25 and 54 watching them than this show does in an episode. Straight up. People like Charlie Kirk and Glenn Beck and Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson, their daily podcast audiences are bigger than MSNBC's 12A to 12P total network cume. Okay? So, it's a dwindling audience. All right? It's also an overwhelmingly white audience. It's an overwhelmingly white audience. The level of, which means that's the content that they want. They want to absorb that level of self-loathing. And I'm just going to tell you right now, that level of self-loathing, a network largely anchored by white people, talking overwhelmingly to white people, producing content that says whiteness as a pejorative. I don't even know what whiteness is, by the way. Do you even know what it is?
It's racism.
Yeah, I don't even know what that even is. Like, I have no clue. Okay? I mean, I've been as white as long as I know. I have absolutely no idea what that even is. Okay? I mean, whiteness in the South, white people in the South act different than white people out West, act different than white people in the Midwest, act different than the white people on the East Coast. I don't even know what a universal conclave of whiteness even is.
Just hating the other.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going to go. Now you're teeing me up. That's where I was going to go. Because this level of self-loathing is as toxic to a culture as racism is. It's the same thing as othering, which is what you were just describing. It's the same thing as othering, just a different flavor, right? So you go into the frozen food aisle, look at the ice cream shelf, right? The fundamental ingredients are all the same, except for where there's a variation is, which flavor is it? Is it chocolate chip cookie dough? Is it Neapolitan? Okay. Just plain old chocolate and vanilla. It's ice cream. It's largely the same substance, regardless of flavor. And there are slight variations in the ingredients depending on the flavor. But fundamentally, it's ice cream. That's why they're all in the same. That's why it's all in the same section. It's just a different flavor. Self-loathing on a systemic level, like what they are promoting there, and have been for many, many years. Self-loathing on a systemic level is just as toxic to a culture as othering people via racism is. It's just a different flavor of that level of toxicity. And I'm just going to tell you, I know Todd gave you his kind of benchmark rant. Let me give you mine. All right. You can't share a culture with that. I don't know how many times I've had to say that the last few years. I'm going to have to say it quite a few more. It is impossible to share a culture with that. And, well, Steve, you just said that MSNBC's audience is dwindling. Yes, the audience for MSNBC is dwindling. But the audience for that message, not necessarily so.
Exactly.
Didn't we just watch Rahm Emanuel on Megyn Kelly's show just a few days ago say, well, of course men can't become women. And she said, well, why don't other people in your party just simply say this? What did he say next? Do you remember what he said next? He said, I have to go into witness protection now. I think one of the reasons why MSNBC's viewership is declining so rapidly, CNN, I think, is a different case. They use some of this language. CNN people originally thought for many years was actually attempting to be objective. Maybe it had a left of center bent overall, but was a place that when we were growing up, that's where everybody tuned in for breaking news was to CNN.
Right.
Whether it was the first Iraq War, whether it was 9/11, okay. What's happened with CNN is they have uniquely squandered their credibility. They went from an outlet that, for the most part, was trying to brand itself as a serious news outlet into essentially becoming the JV version of MSNBC. And it's ruined their credibility, and they'll probably never recover as a network. MSNBC has, for the better part of most of the 21st century. You can go back to the very beginning of the 21st century. Alan Keyes had a show on MSNBC. Tucker Carlson did. But pretty much in a post-9/11 world, so we're going on almost a complete generation now, MSNBC has been some point or some aspect, the degrees have amplified, but has been some mouthpiece for the Democratic Party in America. It's been their outlet. That's where they've chosen to try to figure out their niche. And so I think their audience is dwindling for another reason. The reason why their audience is dwindling is you can get that messaging in every left-wing institution in America. There's nothing unique about them.
Yep.
It's the same reason why churches that abandon tradition and orthodoxy, they always see their numbers go down. It doesn't actually expand their footprint. There's not more people going to ELCA churches overall than there was a decade ago. There's not more people going to Episcopalian churches overall than there were 2 decades ago. Except for a couple of branches of the Presbyterian Church, there's not more people going to their churches than there were 2 or 3 decades ago.
Like locusts, the spirit of the age conquers and it moves on to the next thing.
Not more people going to United Methodist churches than there were 2 or 3 decades ago. Okay? There's more people going to Pentecostal churches than there were 2 or 3 decades ago. There's more people going to Reformed churches than there were 2 or 3 decades ago. Certainly looks like there's more people going to Catholic churches than there were 2 or 3 decades ago. Abandoning your moorings just makes you like everybody else. And people realize, why do I have to get up in the morning, get up early on a Sunday to hear the same message I get from all the other sectors of the culture that I inhabit and populate, and I'm adjoined to, and then they don't give a cringe asking of money and passing of the plate at the end, right? Plus, I've already tithed. I gave to the government. They took taxes out. I already tithed. So why are you asking me for more? Same thing for MSNBC. It's not that the message that they're promoting is losing market share. Listen, we beat Kamala Harris, guys. 48%, 49% of this country thought a DEI candidate who literally used the oldest feminine wiles method of climbing the corporate ladder, to the point that it's become a cliche, and has a double-digit IQ on a good day, looked at all that and said, 49% of America looked at all that and said, actually a little bit more than 49% of America, looked at all that and said, hey, let's give that the nuclear launch codes. Let's give that the key to Fort Knox and the Federal Reserve. So, no, MSNBC's audience is dwindling, but that's just because they're a facsimile of what they're producing in every single institution, all the way down to the Cincinnati Police Department. And that level of self-loathing, is every bit as damaging, whether it comes from a national network or whether it comes from your local police commissioner. That level of self-loathing is every bit as toxic as othering people via racism. It's in the same section of the spirit of the age grocery store. They're in the same aisle. It's different flavors. Gentlemen, your thoughts on that?
Well, just doing some cursory research, police chief, and I think this is the way it is in most cities, is appointed.
Yep.
So this Theetge, police chief Theetge, was appointed by the Cincinnati city manager, who goes by the name of Cheryl Long. Cheryl Long was appointed as city manager by Cincinnati Mayor Aftab Puravel, whose parents are from India and Tibet, respectively, and who had an interest in politics from a very young age, running for a student council in the 8th grade with the campaign slogan of Big, Brown, and Beautiful. So there's a little bit more parenthetical information for you there, Todd.
What in there was about her qualifications to run a police department for a major metropolitan city?
What do you mean qualifications?
Exactly.
So, see, this is where we've been making jokes about New York and what's his face taking over. So, what happens if New York becomes run by a communist socialist? It's already happening in Cincinnati, and it's been happening for a while. Listen, we've got this reprieve, whatever we got. Steve's talked about late stage Republic nonsense. Right now, we might be in like a Hezekiah moment, but we still need a Josiah moment, and we need a sustainable one. And you have to take your cities back. There's no moving out to the suburbs. There's no corporations moving on somewhere else. You cannot watch this rot happen to this many people. This again, make your jokes about the coast. It's Cincinnati.
Brother, the comparison you just made there, the biblical analogy you just made there, straight up prophetic. I want to make sure we don't get out of here without itemizing that for the audience. Hezekiah takes over and restores proper order and worship in Israel. And it says about him in the first Passover, not since the days of, I think it's either Solomon or Moses, had Israel celebrated the Passover like this, okay? But he doesn't, but even though he was a good king for the most part, he doesn't go all the way. He doesn't go up to the high places.
That's the word I was going to say. If you stepped in, you're going to repeat my thought.
Yeah. He doesn't go up to the high places and tear down
the Josiah moment.
Yeah, the shibboleths, okay? And so they kind of remain. They're in the background. They're not in the foreground, but they're in the background, and they're still very operative and still heavily populated by the people. Josiah is the last great king of Old Testament Israel. He is the last king to go up to the high places. He didn't just restore proper and right order and worship within covenant Israel, but he was the last king to go up to the high places, and he tore down the Asherah poles, and he defiled the prostitution temples to Asherah, the pagan consort of Baal, and defiled it and burned it to the ground. All right, so that it could not. He salted the earth really with the remains of those shibboleths. That's what you're saying. Is if you leave those structures in place. In this last election, we restored some proper right practice and order. Right, some things are back in order. We had to start somewhere. Everything starts with the first step. This election put some things back in order so that we can even have these conversations right now. But we need to understand those high places are there. And at some point, if someone does not go up there and tear those down, this will just be a Hezekiah moment and not really a paradigm shift.
Almost all of our American cities, including Austin, Texas, are currently high places. And we go all back to primordial biblical history. The bigger we got, we started consolidating right out of Cain. The city of Enoch, the Tower of Babel, same thing. Big congregations of people who got together and forgot to make the main thing the main thing. Nothing new under the sun, folks. What are you prepared to do about it, Sean Connery?
I just want my sola scriptura brethren to bookmark that you just got one heck of a biblical hermeneutic right there from the Romanist here on the panel, because that'll preach right there. And that's better than what's getting preached in many Southern Baptist churches today, unfortunately, which is why they're in the position they're in. All right, we'll come back. Dr. Peter McCullough is going to join us, and we're going to get into some of what RFK Jr. is doing with vaccines, because it's the topic of Peter's new book. We'll get to that and more next. Well, one of the blessings in disguise that came out of one of the most awful eras, not just in American history, but really world history, certainly within Western history, the COVID era, was getting to meet an entirely new group of people, small but in number, but mighty nevertheless, who saw the same signs of the times that we did, often saw them better than we did. And we had an opportunity to get to know them, to platform them, to amplify their message. And right there near the top of that list is our good friend, Dr. Peter McCullough. And it's a pleasure to have Peter back with us here on The Blaze. Brother, good to see you, man. How are you?
Thank you. Good.
So, by the way, I thought I'd wear a little maize and blue for you today. Not that I need much cajoling in that area, but you just gave me added extra incentive knowing you're going to be on the show today. So go blue to you.
Here we go.
Your new book, the title of this, I am fascinated by, okay? The title is Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, along with Children's Health Defense. And that title, given your academic credentials, I've said to our audience several times, Peter, you may very well be the most decorated living cardiologist this country has produced, okay? So is this have you undergone, let me start here. Have you undergone a transformation on this topic in the last few years, given what was revealed via COVID, or did you have some lingering skepticism heading into that era?
No, I was transformed. I think, like many doctors, I was just in a slumber over the vaccines. I didn't think much about them. They weren't a part of my practice at all. I had taken all the childhood vaccines. My kids did. Nobody had any problems with them. But boy, when these COVID vaccines were ushered in, and we started seeing death in the vaccine center, heart damage, blood clots. That's what I'm seeing today in my office, Steve, every day. It's now 5 years going. These COVID vaccines have caused great harm. And so when we decided, John Leake and myself, to go back in history and ask the question, where did this come from? We tapped into an unbelievable story of hubris and arrogance and power and money, and it was all around the vaccines.
All right, let's take these three terms one by one, okay? Mythology, right? You're a man of science, okay? Mythology, kind of a dead philosophy, the ancient aspects of Western tradition that basically Christianity killed off. So why are you bringing that term into this? Why do you think it applies to this discussion and debate, Peter?
From the very beginning, especially with smallpox, doctors working in this area, they didn't even know what caused smallpox. It wasn't known if it was a virus, a bacteria, if it was due to filth. No one knew how it was transmitted. And, Cotton Mather, we start out with him, a Puritan minister in the early 18th century. He proclaimed that variolation, or the process of trying to take one smallpox pustule and the fluid and inject it in another person, he actually claimed, with him and Dr. Boylston, that was a gift from God. Now, that's the same Cotton Mather, Steve, you probably will recognize, who presided over the Salem witch trials. Mm-hmm. He actually provided advice to the judges. This is an astounding history of vaccinology, where like Edward Jenner, Louis Pasteur, you think Fauci had arrogance and hubris. When Fauci said, "I am science," this is an unbelievable story. Well, people said, it works and you must take it. And they didn't even know what caused these illnesses.
Let's talk about the ideology. What's the ideology behind all of this?
The ideology comes from a deep-seated fear of infectious diseases, that mankind could be wiped out from infectious diseases. And so, through the brilliance of mankind and science, remember when Fauci said that, he represents science, that man can improve upon God's creation. And man can, in a sense, correct imperfections. And so when these vaccines are produced, they have a holy-like air around them, almost as if a talisman. On our book cover, we actually have the numismatic coin from the Vatican, where instead of receiving the Eucharist, the boy's receiving a COVID vaccine. I mean, Steve, this is stunning. And what the ideology says is that, listen, because the vaccines aren't perfect, in order for this to work, everyone must take them without exception. And if there's casualties along the way, they should accept those for the greater good.
Let me ask a follow-up question in this realm, because your life's work is trying to improve the human condition via medical science, right? And so what's the rubric? What's the metric for knowing that this is an advancement, and that all advancement comes with a form of risk, as you know, right? Okay. That this advancement is worth the risk to improve the human condition. And then how do we know that we're doing that, as opposed to going so far that we now believe that, as you said, we can actually improve upon God's creation?
Well, that's the reality, Steve. So, we take a careful look at the reality. Now, fortunately, all the infectious diseases that are targeted by vaccines, they were going away or gone before the vaccines were ever rolled out. So smallpox was transmitted by kids sleeping with one another, poor hygiene. You could clear up smallpox just by better, family hygiene, improved water and sewer, fresh air, better food quality, etc. We know that because even diseases that, are not treated with vaccines, like erysipelas or tuberculosis or scarlet fever or rheumatic fever, there's no vaccines for those. They essentially have dramatically declined as well. So we know vaccines couldn't have been the reason why these diseases went away, that we've had antibiotics and testing and hygiene and modern ICU care. We can save people from serious illness. But what we saw with this vaccine religion is the public health officials have given all the credit to the vaccine.
So things like Semmelweis, and if we wash our hands before, why is the childbirth the leading cause of death for women in the first 7,000 years of recorded human history? Well, if we maybe washed our hands and they were bacteria-free before we inserted them into the female's most intimate aspects of their anatomy, maybe that wouldn't happen. And of course, he got repaid for that, but they put him in a sanitarium and let him die there. Okay. So are you saying that these modern conveniences that we have created has had at least as much to do with the devastation of these illnesses as the vaccines have?
Yeah, for sure. So just hand washing is a great example. Improved hygiene. Quarantine was a big advancement of actually people sick staying away from people who were not sick. That's where quarantine comes from. With the COVID pandemic, the people without the disease were quarantined. It's the first time that's been inverted. So what we've learned is that we've made progress against infectious diseases. Vaccines have played a role, but in almost every circumstance, Steve, there is a price to be paid. So let me give you an example. As a kid, I had chickenpox. It was a mild illness. I got through it. But, my kids got the chickenpox vaccine, and they have not had chickenpox. It's a convenience not to have chickenpox. However, multiple studies show the kids who took the chickenpox vaccine, when they get to be adults, they have higher rates of shingles, and now they're taking shingles vaccines. So there's never a free lunch.
All right. You and I have done this many times. Let's look at the data. All right, let's do the data again, okay? The median life expectancy for an American male in 1900 was 46.3 years, okay? By 1985, that had jumped to 71.2 years. Now, why did I choose 1985? Because, number one, that's 40 years ago, so we have a full generation of data since then. But number two, that's the year before the act that protected all the vaccine manufacturers went into play, right? And so, Todd and I talk about all the time as Gen Xers, when we were going to school, when we started going to school in the late 70s, early 80s, there were 16, 17 vaccines. All the parents gave all the kids, including us, right? Okay. Now that number is like 80 or something. It's some crazy number of what they want to do starting out even in utero now. Okay. So from 1900 to 1985, we had nearly, that's about off the top of my head, 80% increase in life expectancy from 46.3 to 71.2. But since 1985 now, with all these extra injections and everything else, median life expectancy for the male right now is only 75. Now, correlation is not causation, but there's been a dramatic slowdown in the growth of male life expectancy in America in the last 40 years compared to the previous 80 years before that. Now, we only had modern mass vaccination as we have known it, really going back to polio, Jonas Salk going on TV. This is post-World War II. So that cuts that time period in half. So there have to already be other factors involved in that increase in the median male life expectancy. You see where I'm going with this? As a scientist, am I onto something in how I'm laying this out? Because that's really the ultimate epidemiological question, right? I mean, is it doing more good than harm, right? That's the real question we're always asking, right?
Right, for sure. Now, adults, in terms of cause of death, Steve, 40% is heart disease, no vaccines for that. 40% is cancer, no vaccines for that outside of the HPV vaccine. And then 20% is other causes. So vaccines don't play a role in longevity, but sadly, they may play a role in chronic disease now. So what we've seen is an explosion of food allergies in children, allergic diseases, neuropsychiatric diseases, which are very troubling. And we see more and more vaccines. In fact, it's a collinear rise in both. The vaccines are given during a very vulnerable period of immunologic and neurologic development in children. So I'm not against vaccines, but yeah, I think we need to rethink this. And I'll tell you a few principles. One is if vaccines are given separately, they're safer than combinations. If they're given later in life, beyond the period of neurologic development, far safer. And then lastly, is probably a tailored approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. A child who has cystic fibrosis and lung disease, they probably do need the respiratory vaccines. Or a child who has congenital asplenia or has had a spleen taken out for Hodgkin's disease, they probably need the encapsulated organism vaccines. But there are too many studies now, Steve, showing a healthy child born today is healthier with no vaccines.
That statement that you just made about what are the leading causes of death in America, overwhelmingly so, heart disease and cancer. We have no vaccines for these. So right away, that calls into question the math and why are we taking all these shots if they don't help with the leading two causes of death? Before we even get to symptoms and side effects and where did peanut allergies come from when I don't ever remember a single kid not having peanut butter as a food group growing up, and now everybody's panicked about it. Before we even ask those questions, why take 80 shots? Just why gamble with your body over 80 shots when they don't actually address the two things most likely to kill you? That in and of itself is pretty profound. But in the 3 minutes we have here, let me make myself your patient for a second, okay? So 2 years ago, I had a serious battle with MRSA. I didn't know what it was. I let it go. I did the guy thing. I'll just put it off, right? This thing's growing into my hair, my armpit. I think maybe it's because I'm using too much deodorant, whatever, okay? Next thing you know, now my temperature's 106. I'm unconscious. I don't remember anything. I'm in an ER, okay? And if I'd let it go a little bit longer, probably would have killed me, they told me, okay? Now, the thing with MRSA is, if you get it once, it has a tendency to kind of try to reoccur, right? So I had another thing show up on the back of my neck last year. Right away, I didn't play around with this. Went to the doctor. He was able to lance it, take care of it. It was fine, okay? But he was adamant that I needed to take my I'd not had a booster for tuberculosis since I went to Haiti on a mission trip in 2014. So it'd been about a decade, all right? And he was adamant that I needed to take that because of, what that would do for my overall inflammation level and everything else, trying to fight back against this bacterial infection. Should I have taken that?
I don't think so. The tetanus has nothing to do with the staphylococcus. By the way, the MRSA is actually in the nose, Steve. Mm-hmm. About 25% of people gets colonized there. And when you touch your nose and it spreads elsewhere. So staph is a completely different threat than tetanus. And so your doctor is kind of off base. I was part of a research team where we tried to develop a staph vaccine, staphylococcal, and we failed. The organism is too resistant. So you have to keep yourself clean, use antibacterial soaps, keep the weight down. And then probably the most effective strategy is to use an ointment called mupirocin in the nose. And there's different protocols for that, just to make sure you've eradicated the MRSA. About 25% of doctors and nurses have it because they're in the hospital with patients with MRSA.
All right, I've got a minute and a half here left. What would you say, because I'm getting this question a ton, including from my own children, now that they're adults. Hey, what do we do with our kids in these vaccines? What would you say to people, Peter?
World Council for Health says, as of 2022, safer to wait. Don't sign up for any vaccines during pregnancy. It wasn't done when my wife had kids. Steve, it wasn't done. This is a brand new thing to give healthy women vaccines in pregnancy. It's not necessary. It can cause premature labor or miscarriage. So skip all the vaccines during pregnancy. Skip all the vaccines early in life. And then take them later on after the child is grown and out of this risk period. I am very leery of a child between 12 and 15 months getting 16 shots at once, 16 different vaccines, having a seizure at home, and either having sudden infant death syndrome or developing a neurologic problem like seizures, tics, or autism spectrum disorder. It's just too much information suggesting that vaccination has gone too far. And not against vaccines. They can be given later in life, depending on risks and other situations.
Name of the book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. Peter, what's the best way you want our people to go get this book from you?
They can go to Skyhorse Publishing. They were nice enough to be our trade publisher. Got great comments on the back from Senator Ron Johnson, Joe Rogan, a terrific group. You can certainly get it on Amazon, but you're going to find this an entertaining read. Steve, I know you love history, and boy, it's well cited. This is gripping. The characters come alive. You're going to really get to know Louis Pasteur. You're going to get to know these people and then understand why people lost their minds over vaccines in the last few years.
All right, skyhorsepublishing.com is where you can get it. You can also get it at Amazon. Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. It is on my list. I am going to read it. So, Peter, it's always good to see you, brother. Don't be a stranger. Anything you need, you let us know, okay?
Thanks, Steve.
You bet. All right, we're up against the break here. Anticipating there was going to be a carryover conversation with Peter, I didn't overload the next segment so that we would have some time at the beginning to get reaction, particularly from you, to what you just heard. Okay? Because that is one of the Baylor, USC, Michigan. This is one of the most decorated cardiologists in American history saying, hold your horses here. More on that in a moment. Stay tuned. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Aaron McIntyre, Todd Erzen, and all of you. And you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Take advantage of that by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Also, please subscribe to our new YouTube channel at Deace Show there, at Deace Show on YouTube. And then finally, if you wouldn't mind, leave us a 5-star review on the podcast platform that you prefer. You can also hit subscribe, or if you're on Apple iTunes, follow, and that'll make sure that every time we do a new episode, it shows up for sure inside your podcast feed. Thank you if you've done that for us as well. Each and every one of those appreciated too. Thank you. And also appreciate our friends over at Tyga Coolers. It's summertime, so it's cooler season. You guys have heard us talk about Tyga before. They've been a part of our show for the last few years. And it's not just that they make a pretty dope cooler. They do. It's made with American-made parts, American workers, all right, same America values that you are trying to conserve as well, and make sure that they are first and foremost. Good, sturdy coolers that keep what you want to keep cool this time of year, the coolest it can be, but they look cool too. Tons of customizable options, including your own imagination, as long as it's not like obscene or get some sued for a copyright violation. So any kind of family logo, memory, corporate logo, memory, you want to put on there, anything you want to embarrass your kid, You're following them around travel season, maybe for baseball this time of year, or you got football tailgating coming up. Going to follow your kid's senior year of varsity football. Put his picture on it. They love when you do that. All right. All right. You can do that and more and make America cooler again and save 10% if you use my code Steve and you go to TaigaCoolers.com. TAIGA for TaigaCoolers.com. Use the promo code Steve for 10% off. Promo code Steve for 10% off at Taiga Coolers, TAIGA, TaigaCoolers.com. Promo code Steve. All right. That was 18 minutes of packing a wallop from Peter McCullough last segment. Just to kind of recap what he had to say. Number one, COVID caused him to, as a decorated cardiologist. I mean, the guy started, I think, 2 different medical journals in his career. He is credited with medical degrees and/or professorships at multiple universities, including top schools like USC and the University of Michigan. He's one of the most decorated cardiologists in American history, certainly among the most decorated alive today. And what he saw during the scamdemic caused him to reevaluate a lot of his own preconceived notions and processes. And I remember when Daniel and I got to the end of Rise of the Fourth Reich, and we would interview all these people for Rise of the Fourth Reich, and we'd always have, after we let them go, we'd have a bit of a download time. How do we want to proceed? What do we want to highlight, in their section of the book? And we had our final interview done. I'll never forget that Daniel said to me, he goes, this is probably not the first time they've done something like this, right? And just froze me. I didn't even want to consider that. I was having a hard time believing what I knew was happening, let alone contemplating what's been going on since before I knew it was happening. Sounds like Peter McCullough had this exact same experience. And as a man of science, he started asking questions, didn't like the lack of answers he was getting. Pointing out, I thought he was going to drop magical power of vaccines. Just talking about how it's causing people to just lose their minds, okay? Rather than to look at the actual data. And if you dare to say, well, why don't we look at the data to make sure it works and it's safe? They look at you not like you're doing them a solid to make sure that the juice is worth the squeeze, but that how dare you would interfere with, what did he call it, a talisman? That's a nice little word for idol or shibboleth, okay? That's a synonym for those terms. When I mentioned, he talked about that he thought the 20th century's greatest advancement that we saw in life expectancy came from technological advancements in things like, hygiene, indoor plumbing, sewage, things of that nature. Well, you look at the data that I cited him. The average American male life expectancy in 1900 was 43 years old. By 1985, it had grown to 71. The next year, we give all the vaccine manufacturers pretty much unlimited liability protection. And these shots explode onto the scene over the next 40 years, and life expectancy is only improved for male, median life expectancy is only improved by 4 years. That's nothing, but it's not really all that impressive. It would seem to indicate that it's more, that data would, if we just looked at it prima facie, it would certainly seem that data saw more explosion correlated to the explosion in technology when it came to indoor plumbing, sewage, hygiene, things of that nature. And now that we're fairly advanced in those areas, the ratio has slowed down. And then Mr. McCullough added, hey, the 2 leading causes of death in America, 40% of deaths are heart disease, about 40% are cancer. I don't know. I only went to public school, but I think that adds up to like 80%, right? Okay. So he said roughly 80% of deaths in America are heart disease and cancer. We have nothing, no shots for those. Nothing. And your best chances to fight those are actually lifestyle changes. Okay. So a lot there from a guy whose academic medical credentials are above reproach. So with that, before we get to our next segment, gentlemen, I turn it over to you for reaction.
Reset's an incredibly important lesson. Because we lost our mind vis-a-vis vaccination specifically and making modern medicine a high place. That's why COVID happened. We had already lost our mind.
Meaning the amount of people who were instantly willing to jump in and do whatever they said.
That's why they knew they could do COVID. Because look at it, he admits it. I think if we just specifically talk about nothing else other than him expanding on his personal testimony there. Listen, a man of his caliber, his level of curiosity, intelligence, level of energy, looking under every rock. He's also he has a Christian worldview. He's telling, I was totally captured. I worshiped at a high place. I didn't ask any questions about this. As a man of my stature and my pedigree, I gave it to my kids, even though this is the minute your kids hop out, this is the most the intervention, the medical intervention that is most talked about, most common, and pays the most money. There might be at least some question marks. And even a guy like Dr. McCullough, and most people, he's not unique, weren't asking that question. It's because this is a high place. And then he told you why. Chicken pox. Because we wanted to, not necessarily we were really scared of chicken pox. Why did he tell you we started taking it? Because it was convenient. It added to our comfort. We didn't have to get sick at all, we thought, and take any time off. And I saw this recently as it applies to my back, and I just have to reset it. Not everything is the exact same illness and malady, okay? But the number of people in the name of the Lord who came to me and said, Todd, you don't have to suffer. That's not a Christian sentiment at all. And it's also not a medical sentiment. Yes, you do. Your body actually has to suffer and get a little bit sick so it doesn't get a lot of sick. The number of parents growing up when my kids were small that were talking about the minute their kid had a little fever, they gave them a baby aspirin or that knocked that down. The fact that your child is getting a fever to fight off whatever it has means it's working. When you knock down the fever, it can't attack. It's not attacking. We have gotten too smart by half doesn't mean to begin to cover it. And it's, again, because we like our false gods. And if you do not understand the level of power you think you get by shaking your fist at God and saying, to your point, Steve, are we really just trying to alleviate human suffering? Or do we think we're the people we've been waiting for? We've actually enhanced God's design, because that's what modern medicine thinks it's doing it all the time. And quite frankly, for every Dr. McCullough or a layperson who has learned this lesson, there are still how many people who think, oh my goodness, had it not been for the mRNA vaccine, it would have been heaping piles of ash by now. You still love the lie as much as ever. We still have so far to go, but thank God a man like Dr. McCullough has added to the men who are now the amount of energy he's pouring in, including this book, to tell you, you have got to change this paradigm. You are committing suicide medically and culturally by believing in this false god.
Yeah, and those, I just think of the people who are somewhat aware now, or at least starting to ask questions and starting to take actions in a way that is opposed or does not fit in with the medical establishment's prescriptions for your entire life. Mm-hmm. And everybody's kind of, on a different journey amongst those who are aware and asking questions. Todd brings up the point, though, that there are so many people who just want to outsource those sorts of decisions to somebody else. Just, I don't know. I don't want to do the research. I don't want to put in the time. I would say that's still the majority of people. It's a minor miracle. It might actually be a miracle that somebody like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is actually at HHS right now. Going back to the first segment, we brought ourselves some sort of reprieve. But I'll just say, in my own family, like we totally tracking with what Todd is saying, if there's a sickness, running a fever, it's not time for aspirin. It's not time for any of the other fever reducers. Time to hop in the bath. If one of our littles has it, time to hop in the bath. Might give them a little something, but we have a lot of homeopathic remedies, things like that. When it comes to vaccines in our family, we're not doing the whole CDC. We decided we're not doing the 666 vaccinations before they reach 3 hours old.
Yeah,
I'm exaggerating, but we're not doing that. If anything, we're going to do a delayed schedule, and we're not going to do the total schedule. Did that with Ben up to a point, and then tried to do the same thing with Abby. You know, if they're doing well developmentally, we think their risk-benefit analysis with some of these vaccines, not all of them, and we're only going to do them one at a time. And so we did take, you know, Abby in. I think she was 6 months, something like that. Got one dose of one vaccine. Next day, itchy all over. To this day, folks, it's 90 degrees in Iowa, and my heart breaks for that little girl. It's 90 degrees in Iowa. She has to have her entire appendages covered, or else she'll start itching. Now, by the grace of God, she is healing, and she's a lot better than she was 6 months ago. But also, a couple months ago, had to purchase an EpiPen because she's got a peanut allergy. This stuff is evil, and it's definitely the latter category of what Todd was talking about. It's not just the alleviation of human suffering. It is the playing God. We were trying to do all of the calculations and, you know, trying to do all of the risk-benefit analysis, and we did, and we came to a conclusion. But I'm just telling you, I just go back to what the conversations I had with Todd when we first started working together. If you, and I'm talking about you, the medical establishment, cannot look any regular person in the eye and tell them beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is no risk to whatever you're telling them to put inside their body, there needs to be room for grace. There needs to be room for choice. And look at what the American College of Pediatrics is doing, or the American Academy, whatever it's called, that I had in the montage. No exemptions. Everybody has to do it. And that's just been the mantra this whole time. This is the medical establishments. This is the medical systems version of what we've talked about in the church. Different churches, the suburban megachurch. We just have our own way of doing things. The Holy Spirit needs our help. This is the same thing, just in a different arena. Because when you start from the premise of you can escape the consequences of a sinful world, you're always going to end up with damage. And I think that's the premise that we're starting with, instead of truly the alleviation of human suffering. So everybody's kind of at a different place on this journey. I know we are, in my family, in our family, a different place than we were 2-3 years ago on this journey. And I pray that everybody, I pray that people don't have to learn hard lessons along the way. But I fear that that's where a lot of people are.
And listen, man, we're not cultists. We don't belong to the Christian Science cult, which is neither Christian nor scientific, right? Aaron, you just had in your montage late last week an incredible story out of the University of Iowa.
Yeah.
In the advancements in modern medical technology that took a baby way premature in utero. And now it was a boy, if I remember correctly, right? And just had his 1-year-old birthday, right? And now he's just he's just your average, precocious, adorable, 1-year-old human being. But the refusal, when you say, you know what, let me answer my own question to Dr. McCullough before we move to the next topic. When I asked him, all right, so you're a man of science. How do you know when you are alleviating human suffering as part of the human condition or playing God? How do you know? Okay. Let me give you a practical example of how you know. When someone puts out an edict that says everybody has to take something and there are no exceptions, like we just saw a leading American medical group do this morning.
Sounds like you're describing Jonestown.
Yes. When someone says something like that, and we're not in the midst of a literal Walking Dead zombie apocalypse, we are not in the midst of a 25% CFR Black Plague. So we're talking world-changing, way of life altering event of existential nature, where survival in and of itself for an entire species is on the line. Barring something like that, there is never something that 100% of people should have to take, regardless of their situation. There's never something there's no exceptions to. Right away, that is a tell. We're somewhere between Ye Be Like God and the island of Dr. Moreau. We're somewhere between those two places. That's a tell right there. You cannot be treated as an individual. You cannot be trusted as an individual. Your body is not a temple of the Holy Spirit. Just like your children belong to us, so do you. That's how you tell right there, 100%. Now, this conversation we just had, I'm going to tell you, not great, Bob, for the new YouTube channel. Fair? Not going to be great. Not going to. Probably a lot of people are going to find out they didn't really subscribe to our YouTube channel when they thought they did like 6 months ago after the conversation we just had here, when this goes up later today. This is another reason why you want to make sure you get our content directly from us over at Blaze TV. And right now, we're giving it to you, big discount. Use my last name, Deace, as your promo code. You get $20 off. Makes it just $8 a month, 26 cents a day, so that you get all of this completely unfiltered, uncensored, directly from us to you, but then all the other exclusive content we do every day at Blaze TV as well. All right, get $20 off with the promo code DEACE, DEACE. $20 off with the promo code DEACE when you go to blazetv.com/DEACE. Get your annual subscription for $20 off, blazetv.com/DEACE, promo code DEACE. All right, let's get to fake news or not for this week. But I'm not sure if it's fake news or not, or idolatry or not. We're going to show you here in a moment a montage. I want to make sure we give credit to the gentleman that put this together, Larry O'Connor at WMAL, big talk station in Washington, D.C. Larry O'Connor put this together.
I think it's media MRC.
Oh, did he get it from them?
Yes.
Okay, my bad.
It's got the MRC watermark
Okay,
on
all
it.
right, my bad. Okay, so because I got it from Larry. So, you know what, Larry? You got a free plug on the Blaze. So there you go. Let's make sure we give Media Research Center the true source of this montage that I originally saw from Larry. And they put this together in response to a bunch of media claiming last week, after what Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard came forth with, that the Obama administration knew all along the Russian collusion narrative was complete bunk and a complete hoax. And yet they knew this, and they pushed for it anyway. And that launched us into essentially a 2.5-year ordeal, the Mueller probe, endless media attempting to stymie, shut down the Trump presidency, et cetera. And in response to this, they're now saying, well, no one claimed that Russia interfered with the election, or that's why Trump won. Media Research Center put this montage together. As you're watching it, gentlemen, and those of you in the audience as well, I want you to watch. Don't just listen to the words. In fact, it might even be better to put it on mute, maybe. And look at the body language and the level of certainty that these things are said and expressed. Because I think we need to figure out if what you're about to see is fake news or not, or idolatry or not. Because it'll tell us a lot about where we are right now in our cold civil war, depending on which one of these it is. Watch this for yourself.
Russia hacking the election to elect Trump is the end of our democracy. Votes were definitely affected. Russia hacked the election to tilt it to Mr. Trump.
The Russians definitively hacked the election.
Russia did hack the election.
No doubt. The Russians hacked the election.
Yes. Russia hacked the election.
Fact, Russia hacked the election.
President-elect Donald Trump still not sounding convinced that Russia hacked the election.
The president does not want to come to terms with the fact that the Russians hacked the election.
President Trump says he still wonders if the Russians hacked the election.
If you can get him to accept that Russia hacked the election, see if you can get him to accept who won the Civil War.
If he admits it, it casts a shadow on his victory over Hillary Clinton.
Russia hacked the election.
Russia hacked the election.
Russia hacked the election.
Russia hacked the election.
Let's be clear, Russia hacked the election. Definitively, Russia hacked the election, and Russia is doing it again now.
Election-related cyber hacking.
Cyber hacking of U.S. elections. Cyber hacking of the election.
Russia was cyber hacking the election.
Russia was cyber hacking the election.
The CIA, the FBI, NSA.
All of these intelligence organizations.
17 intelligence agencies.
All conclude that Russia hacked the election.
If we find out that Donald Trump just theoretically was colluding with Russia while they were hacking the election, that is completely impeachable.
This dossier alleged a conspiracy between the Trump campaign
and the Russian effort to hack the election.
The director of national intelligence, the head of the National Security Agency, the head of the FBI, all of these intelligence experts saying Russia hacked the election.
The FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the former director of national intelligence, James Clapper, I mean, they've all said this. So to believe that that's wrong, you have to believe they're all involved in an elaborate conspiracy to get Donald Trump, which seems a little far-fetched to me.
All right. Is what you just watched fake news, weaponized political propaganda? Let me rephrase that. Merely weaponized political propaganda. Or something darker, idolatry. What do you think? Because I think the answer to this question tells us a lot about what DEFCON we need to be at in this cold civil war.
It's definitely idolatry.
All right, explain.
Well, we're commanded in Scripture, once I did as a child does, but now
I once thought and speak and reasoned as a child. Now it became a man. I set aside childish things.
I set aside childish things as becoming an adult. Now we're also commanded to be like children. There's the positive and negative aspects of childhood as sinner, just like there is anything else. We're positive. We're
childlike in faith, but not in reasoning.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's where we are. What you're seeing there, if you are a parent who's raised children, you are seeing childlike behavior, temper tantrum on steroids there, and they get very proud for the dumbest reasons in defending their lies, and it's something you can't accept on any level. But we've farmed out this trust the experts to media, just like we have to education and medicine and all this, and almost every manner of cultural stronghold that used to be one of the tent poles of any civilization worth having, and now are the things that hold us in chains. You cannot have a level, there's no interest in conversation or discernment amongst those people. That is the serpent in the garden, knowing he's got you after he said, did God really say, and you've taken a bite of that apple. The same way as why COVID was possible because of what we believed about vaccination beforehand, COVID was also possible about what we believed the press, people in a position of power to put out a message, like a talking point memo like that level of consistency. And they're saying at the end with what's his nuts there, I can't remember.
Siliza, I think.
Cizilla, yeah, where he says, that's a little bit far-fetched. You have to do a 180. The thing that should be far-fetched is that you can get an entire media conglomerate for that many months on end to stick to a narrative like that. That is what should be far-fetched amongst the people who are spiritually disciplined, who are genuinely reasonable, and who take their duties of citizenship seriously. But we don't, so we get Cizilla running our lives, and we deserved it.
Aaron?
If it were not for what we're hearing in current day, which is we never claimed Russia hacked the election, I might give the time of day to the argument that this was merely but still over-the-top weaponized political misinformation, disinformation, whatever term of art you want to use. If it were not for what we're hearing today, I might have given that argument the time of day, although I still would have been convinced that it was idolatrous. But here's what tips it over the edge for me for good. Is just on a dime, on a freaking dime. This was every single media outlet, legacy media outlet, for 3 years. For 3 years, 4 years, really the entirety of Trump's first administration. That was just a taste of what they were like. It's like the guy who was responding to Chris Cuomo saying, where does it say in the Constitution you have a freedom to speech? And he's just chowing down on some ramen, and he just points behind him on the chroma key and says, right here in the Constitution. That's where it says it. And now we've got all these people saying, well, we never claimed that. No, that was never the claim. This is neither here nor there. I want to be that hey, look at this montage. You were saying that for 4 years. Mm-hmm. That's what tips it over the edge for good for me, that this is definitely idolatry, that you can spin on a dime Russia hacked the election and Trump colluded with Russia while they were doing it over and over and over again. Evidence is produced that says our intelligence agencies actually had no evidence that Russia interfered in the election. And then the next minute, we never claimed that Russia interfered in the election. We never claimed that. That is idolatrous. And it's not just the folks in the media, it is their audience. Dwindling though they may be, I don't know if you've seen CNN's numbers that the White House has been touting the last few days, abysmal. But it's not just the media that is idolatrous here. It's everybody who listens to them, everybody who pays it. It's still any level of attention to them that just presented with, diametrically 180 degrees opposite information to the narrative that they've been sold, and they just go along with the defense of the ones that were peddling that narrative. It's just disturbing. I invoked Jonestown earlier. You might as well have just substituted Jim Jones's final message. You can hear, they've got that recording. You can listen to it on YouTube. You might as well have just substituted that recording with what we just heard.
And here's the other way you know that this is a cult of personality. They all still have their jobs. Yeah. Just like the police chief in Cincinnati must be fired.
This is a
These
good point.
people must be fired, but they're not because it's a cult.
Let me actually make your point another way, if you don't mind. It's not that they just have their jobs, because I think what you're saying is they would have been fired for how wrong they were.
Yes.
But even if this was, as Aaron said, an extremely cynical point of merely weaponized political rhetoric, they would have been fired for their ineffectiveness.
Yeah.
Because the guy got elected. It didn't work.
Right.
The guy got elected again. Right. You just would have taken the quarterback who sucked and wasn't good for your team, and benched him and got a new guy. You'd have fired the coach. You would have fired those who, that's the thing. If it was merely political weaponized rhetoric, the fact it didn't work, and the guy's more popular right now than he ever was before when they were doing this to him, okay? They would have gotten rid of them and gotten people better at this, whose credibility was not shot,
right?
All right, they could reintroduce, they could repackage, they would have rebranded and gone with something else.
This has everything to do, if I may bust in, this has everything to do with the post that you quoted this morning from Walter Kern. Reporters didn't have to be truthful. Pollsters didn't have to be accurate.
Right.
Comedians didn't have to be funny. Programming didn't have to be profitable. And it all happened at the same time. Why? Yep. Was it an emergency response to Trump, or was it a shift to the new model? Well, everything you're saying here has everything to do with that post.
If it was just a merely political op, they'd have gotten rid of the people that sucked, who were of no use anymore. And instead, it's the same media people gaslighting us the other way. All the same people in that clip are the same ones now telling us they never said any of this. That's how you know it's idolatry, not just mere politics. And because it's idolatry, let me say it again, you won't be able to share a country with this. All right?
Smash it.
The only thing stopping them from doing things to you that are unspeakable is just the limits of their own reach and access to doing so, nothing actually in their own consciences. Hey, in these unprecedented times, make sure you've got a real estate agent you can trust. Word going down that we might be on the brink of a rate cut from the Fed. We'll see. Because people are anxious to get back into the real estate market again. I mean, we're seeing a lot compared to nothing. Real estate activity in our neighborhood still lower than it used to be prior to COVID. But that means people are ready to get back in should the incentive structure act accordingly. But a lot's changed since the last time we incentivized this thing called the real estate market, which takes you back to like the fall of 2019. That means you need an agent more than ever before that can help you guide you through all those various changes, someone whose track record of success has remained intact during these unprecedented times.
Bang.
Where would you find such an agent? Well, just go to the website where the name says it all. Real Estate Agents I Trust is where you can go. realestateagentsitrust.com will hook you up with one of those kinds of agents we just described, the kind that you're going to want to then recommend to your friends and family moving forward. realestateagentsitrust.com. Get started there, whether you're going across the country, whether you're going across town. realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, let's switch gears, get into Pop Culture Tuesday. This is where we look at the intersection of what's trending in the world of pop culture and how that aligns with those kinds of things we're attempting to defend and conserve that have been proven to be good, true, and beautiful for the human condition throughout the ages. I want to talk about Happy Gilmore 2. And let's talk about it as a movie first and foremost. I will tell you about, I've seen people I know in our business, including several who are friends of mine, talk about they just had to tap out. Movie was not any good. And they all talk about, usually it's around the first 40 minutes, first 20 minutes, first act. And I get it. And I nearly tapped out early in this movie myself, just because it was kind of poorly constructed and written. It gets better as things go along, particularly when when Happy gets back into professional golf and he gets reunited with his contemporaries, and it's a who's who. I mean, Scotty Scheffler, Brooks Koepka. Bryson DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka are in together. I thought they hated each other, okay? Or at least Koepka, I thought, hated DeChambeau, okay? Xander Schauffele, I mean, and then Jack Nicklaus is in this. Freddie Couples is in this. Curtis Strange is in it. Okay, they have this kind of funny thing where he just eats everybody's dessert. It's kind of funny. Maybe it's Freddie Couples that does that. I can't remember. Anyway, this thing is loaded with, Vern Lundquist does the play-by-play. Okay, this thing is loaded with cameos and guest star appearances. And as you get into the final act, the movie gets better as it gets. And when I say get better, it's still not objectively good, but it gets more enjoyable. And in the end, I can tell you, I had fun with the film in the end. Now, let me say this, though. This film, this is quintessential Sandler when he was younger. This film is exceptionally crude. I mean, this film takes, now, I wouldn't say it's profane. I mean, there's more sensuality in the Sydney Sweeney ad than there is in this movie. And in fact, if you remember the first film, he has this reoccurring lingerie fantasy of his wife, right? He recreates that in this movie and then's like, listen, man, I got to grow up and come up with stuff that's more my age to take me in my happy place. And the first thing that he hits is his sweatpants say size medium, and he's like very happy to see this. And as somebody who now is wearing medium-sized sweats and shorts for the first time since like high school, I felt like they made that scene just for me. All right. But in terms of potty humor, bathroom humor, I mean, it doesn't spare much. Okay. It's not sensual or in any way whatsoever, but it doesn't spare much in the crudity. But here's what the movie is about. And because of its crudity and what the movie is about, that's why I wanted to talk about it. See, we had this conversation yesterday about the Sydney Sweeney ad. And we talked about the fact that there are aspects of it that are so sensual, Aaron didn't feel comfortable putting in our montage. And, we're a show that I think justifiably at times gets criticized, given our emphasis on a biblical worldview, for not, frankly, being modest or prude enough. And I think there's justifiable criticism where some of that is concerned. And I think there is some criticism where some of you just would not be pleased no matter what. Okay. And so Aaron was like, I don't think we can do that for our show. So I'm like, respect, then don't, But you can see, the attacks from the left against this ad have cascaded even just since yesterday. All kinds of major left-wing media platforms attacking this ad. Aaron just showed you about one in MSNBC during the montage, but there are many more. And we talked yesterday about how this is an ad that previous eras of this culture where Christian morals were more at the forefront institutionally would have frowned upon this level of sensuality, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, in an ad. And yet the same spirit of the age that deconstructed our standards of sensuality, its acolytes and simps are the ones now most offended by that same ad. Why? And we explained yesterday that anything, even if it's warped, but anything that points to anything that's, listen, Sydney Sweeney is an objectively beautiful woman. We can get subjective about how you would line her up against other women that you find, beautiful. but no one would deny she is an objectively beautiful woman, right? Fair? Okay. So the fact that we are promoting her as a culture, as an objectively beautiful woman in a way that is heteronormative, it may be outside the bounds of what Christian morality has said is within its Overton window of public expressions of such things, okay? But it is extremely heteronormative, and it does highlight the fact she's an objectively beautiful woman. And even if it does so in a sensual way that most Christians would think, yeah, did we have to do that? Probably not. The fact that it was willing to do it at all is anathema to the spirit of the age. Because it doesn't want any objective. See, it brought you into the sensual to prepare you for being deconstructed from your senses altogether about what is good, true, and beautiful. That's the lure. That's the monkey's paw. That's the Faustian bargain of all of this, right? Okay. Similarly, I don't know why the spirit of the age would like Adam Sandler's film at all. Because here's what the movie is about. The heart of the film, in and around the potty jokes and the crudity, is that a father has to get his life together, has to grow up, cancel his prolonged adolescence, become responsible again, and sacrifice for his children. And in the midst of that, finds out that he also now has to do whatever, has to now preserve tradition at the same time. From an emerging generation of nihilist deconstructionists who hate tradition and want to deconstruct it and for the purposes of defecating on it. That's the story of the movie. And at first, the nihilists, the deconstructionists think Happy Gilmore, given his unorthodox approach, okay, they think he'll be the star of their effort. And in fact, they tell him he can even continue doing the things in his personal life and behavior that is holding him back from being the father his kids need and deserve. He can even continue doing those things. But he's like, no, I can't do that. I got to let that stuff go. And in the process of doing that, not only doesn't take their offer, but ends up joining with the traditionalists to defeat these people. That, folks, when you strip away the potty humor and the crudity and the locker room humor, you strip it all away, that is the plot of Happy Gilmore 2. Fathers should sacrifice for their children, give up prolonged adolescence, and tradition should be upheld. That's the plot. So my question here with this film, similar to the conversation we had with Sydney Sweeney yesterday, because that as a plot line is something we would absolutely affirm that, right?
Right.
I mean, everything we're all about, everything that I just said, we're all about. What I think is going to be fascinating, because the movie, well, it's a lot like the original and Sandler's 90s, early 2000s eras movies. There's a lot of language in there that and humor in there. Your parents, Rob Schneider, by the way, shout out to Rob. He got a little "you can do it," cameo in the movie too. There's a lot of language and humor in there that our parents and some of this spills over into your generation as well, Aaron, for some of Sandler's later work of this era, that our parents would have just frowned upon and freaked out about. While at the same time, though, was actually instilling and affirming values that our parents were trying to instill and affirm within us at the same time, right? And so what I think is going to be fascinating about this is how we navigate this space as believers. Because why we don't play a lot of Joe Rogan clips on this show? Good luck finding one where someone's just not casually dropping an F-bomb. It's not easy to find. Okay? And so because the church is outsourced so much of its moral preeminence in the culture. And we're now we talked last week about young men being more instinctive than formative, right? Okay? And so therefore the institution that would form the worldview and instill the worldview in people that is supposed to be what is the resistance to the spirit of the age, is just systemically not engaged, right? That's one of the reasons why I'm doing the pastor summit with TPUSA Faith next week, is to try to, let's just say, encourage pastors to do the full work of the ministry. All right. And so we're seeing sectors of the culture instinctively rise up to push back against it. And they don't always sound, holy while doing so. Okay. And I'm going to be fascinated how we navigate this space as believers, because we're not the ones actually leading the charge against the pushback of the spirit of the age. The culture, who is the other aspects of the culture who are kind of, in a way, succumbed to some of the I don't want to make it look like I'm mitigating it, okay, but some of the less grave aspects of the spirit of the age is actually pushing back on the excesses of the same spirit of the age. Is that a good way of putting it, maybe?
Right.
And to me, Scotty Scheffler's behavior in this film is a great example of trying to navigate this. Because Scheffler, of course, is very outspoken about his faith. He was just last week leading up to the British Open. We talked about that a week ago, right? And so looking at how, Xander Schauffele and a lot of these other guys with their appearances in the movie were totally in on the crudity of the film. So I was going to be curious, is Scotty have a speaking part? Maybe he's just doing a cameo to be a good team player. No, he's got actually the biggest speaking part of, and you'll find out as the film goes on, if you watch it, he actually has the biggest speaking part of any of the golfers. But he manages to keep his reputation intact. He does not, his character, which is himself, does not, manages to have, he steals every scene he's in, but he manages to be relevant within this structure, I guess I'll call it. But he doesn't compromise his witness like at all. I think at one point he says to somebody when he's in a jail cell, he's trying to watch the TV, "Hey, sit your ass down." That's the closest he comes to partaking of the meat sacrificed to idols that is much of the rest of this movie. Okay. And I don't really have a point as much as I wanted to introduce one, because I think this film, aside from its crudity, speaks our language and our message. And in the midst of this, we have one of the most public believers in America right now in Scotty Scheffler, who's in the middle of this film with all of this crudity and manages to steal every scene he's in without partaking of it at nearly the level as many of his peer group in the golf world does. So I really wanted to just introduce this as an ongoing discussion point, because I think we're going to have to learn how to navigate these spaces moving forward in this cold civil war, because the church isn't leading the way, right? The instinctive parts of the culture are leading this fight. And so we're going to have to figure out, we're not the ones making the rules of engagement right now, right? And so how do we navigate that space and align with people that are helping, that are good, that are faithful and true in the battle, even at the same time we don't necessarily succumb to some of their methodologies and stay in our own witness. This will be fascinating to watch, I think, moving forward. We got about 2 minutes. You guys have any thoughts on this?
Bella and I just watched rewatch. We both hadn't seen it for quite a while. No Country for Old Men. And a major theme, at least from the perspective of the sheriff, Ed Tom Bell, in that movie, who is an old man, who plays an old man in that movie, is grappling with a future that is vastly approaching him that he does not understand, like a level of evil that he has to grapple with that he doesn't understand. And he thinks it's new. And at the end of the movie, he visits his I think it's his uncle, I think it's his uncle, who just reminds him, this is not new. There's always been evil in this world. There's always been evil in this world. You're just being vain to think that you can stop it yourself. And I think maybe a mistake of previous generations, and I think it's a proclivity of everyone as they get older, is you don't understand the world the way that it used to operate when you were younger. And so there's a really, I think, alluring proclivity. It's easy to just reject everything that you don't understand, that's new and different. But I think this is a perfect opportunity to practice receive, redeem, reject, which is what we've talked about before. There are some things that we can receive, that we can welcome with open arms. There are some things that we can redeem that were maybe not meant for purposes that would align with a biblical worldview. And then there's other things that we just have to reject out of hand. And I think that's going to be really important, at least at the very least in banal conversation, is practicing those three things. And that's something that I struggle with. It's a kind of a lazy thing. Anything that doesn't immediately align with the way I think the world ought to be, we just reject it. Well, no, let's actually take some time to dissect things a little bit. So receive, redeem, reject. I think that's a starting point for how to navigate these conversations.
I'm just thinking about the 1980s while you're talking. I mean, all that Sydney Sweeney stuff is David Lee Roth redoing the Beach Boys' California Girls. It's it sounds like the end of this movie. Instead of having like the daughter turn into, I haven't seen it, Happy Gilmore too, but like some weirdo goth. It reminds me of 16 Candles. Yeah, that was weird and edgy and sometimes over the top. But at the end, these kids were about relationships and coming together. And Ally Sheedy, instead of becoming goth, she is goth, and she becomes the kind of Sydney Sweeney of her age, a cute girl who gets together with the guy, and they realize all
the
this other
Breakfast
stuff
Club,
is
you mean, not sweet. Yeah,
16 Yes, the Breakfast Club, not 16 Candles. So yeah, we're going back to the 80s. It wouldn't be a bad start. It wouldn't be enough, but it wouldn't be a bad start.
Maybe that's a good way of looking at it. I love what Aaron said, but it's not enough, but it's a good start. Stick around and do overtime for Blaze TV subscribers. For the rest of you, we're going to see you tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck. Until then, Romans 8:28.